Good morning, CLC. Welcome to such a fun, entertaining day that we have in store for you. When we first started, we had a few little technical things going on, but worked all of that out, and we're happy you're here. We're happy we can be here. We're happy you're tuning in and joining us. And with that, I invite you right now to say with me, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is. And now, in this moment, I invite you to relax. Take a few deep breaths. Let go of any anxiety or worry, any tension that may be living in your body. Just allow it to melt away for the moment. Take a few deep breaths. Breathing in cool, crisp air. Breathing out all that no longer serves you. Put any tension away, any stress, because this is a moment of thanksgiving and remembrance. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one and all is well. As we begin the inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your right hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging the higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems, while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of the infinite presence, I simply speak these words: I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing the idea as already acted upon and brought to pass, In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in the room with me this morning. I turn toward that image in my mind's eye and say, I am grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone present physically in the room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in gratitude and confidence in saying, I am grateful for the good in your life.
We have a lot to talk about this month. February, the shortest month, has an awful lot going on in it. It's Black History Month. Valentine's Day is coming up, as you heard. We'll celebrate that next week. Mardi Gras. The end of this week, the Lunar New Year. And Purim, the end of the month. And there's a game today. Some kind of game, I don't know. We're not in it. The quarterback of one team was born the year the mother of the quarterback of the other team was 1 year old. I thought that was interesting. It just goes to show that age is not a number, or just a number. And I read, well, it is a number. I read to you last week out of the Science of Mind textbook, my venerable old version here, a meditation by Ernest Holmes where he talks about that we don't give in to the idea of age. And I had an email from somebody this week saying they wanted a copy of that. So because it's all comparison. It's all just in the mind. So I have several complicated, interrelated messages for you today that I am going to try in one attempt, working without a net, to make sensible and useful. Because if it's sensible and it just goes on by and it doesn't get applied, then it's not doing anybody any good. So I'm going to try to work this out, only deciding at the very last minute where to put what I'm about to read. Whether this should go at the beginning to set things up, the middle to flesh things out, or the end to leave you with maximum impact. I may just wind up reading it twice. This is a poem by one of the most honored poets of the 20th century by the name of Gwendolyn Brooks. She was the first African-American female poet laureate of the United States. And I want to read you a poem. This goes right to our teaching, and it goes right to the application of it, a poem called Truth. And if sun comes, how shall we greet him? Shall we not dread him? Shall we not fear him after so lengthy a session with shade? Though we have wept for him, though we have prayed all through the night years, what if we wake one shimmering morning to hear the fierce hammering of his firm knuckles hard on the door? Shall we not shudder? Shall we not flee into the shelter, the dear thick shelter of the familiar propitious haze? Sweet is it, Sweet is it to sleep in the coolness of snug unawareness. The dark hangs heavily over the eyes. Sweet it is to sleep in the coolness of snug unawareness. But we can sleep no longer. We must awaken. We must awaken from the dream, in some cases awaken from the nightmare, and take charge of our own spiritual destiny. Find the place within of our power and use it wisely, and use it constructively. And part of the journey to some place is realizing you're not there yet. I was thinking this in the car on the way here today. I cross over the Grand Parkway. I come from a couple of exits up. I come here. It's an 11-mile drive, actually. It's shorter as the crow flies, but it's 11 miles to get here. And as I cross the Grand Parkway, there are all these cars whizzing by, and I wonder sometimes about their destinations. If there's like a family that's just pulling out onto the feeder road to get on 99. They call it 99 because everybody drives 99 on it. But to get on 99, and where are they going? Maybe they're going to California. You know, maybe this is the start of a big road trip for that family. Or maybe they're just going to the next exit and they just want to beat a few lights. I don't know. But I got to thinking about this on the way here. And I thought about, let's say, is anybody going to San Antonio or Phoenix, Arizona? If you wanted to go to San Antonio, you'd have a map. If you're an old timer like me, you'd have a map. You unfold the thing out, right? And if you're a young whippersnapper, you have GPS, and you have all sorts of stuff, and a talking dashboard, and it's telling you how to get there, right? And you'd know you were on I-10 about, say, Columbus. You're not in San Antonio yet. You got a ways to go. Now you have a choice here. You can get off in Columbus and decide that's good enough. And Columbus, Texas is a fine town for anyone who may be watching from there today. I'm picking it randomly as something I think of as more or less halfway between here and San Antonio. It's a fine town, and it's not San Antonio. And if you have business or purpose in San Antonio, nothing else will do. So it's good to know you got a ways to go. You're not there yet. You measure how things are moving along in your life by how you feel about them. This is true about aging too, rather than measuring the passing years by the falling of numbers. Measure the quality of life and how you feel. I was telling the group before we started today, you might have seen this in the feel-good news this week. I'm looking for that more, the feel-good news. They have whole pages on different things, And this woman who's 104, I think I sent this to you, Jeffrey, because you're an Eric Satie devotee. A woman who's 104, who's coming out with, I think it's her third album of piano recordings of Claude Debussy and Eric Satie and other of the, I guess, late romantic era of composers. 104 years old, and saw a picture of her, and she has I guess you'd say an elderly body. I mean, she's sitting there, and she's a small frame person to start with, but her hands, her hands could probably pick up that piano. I mean, her hands, that strength, that tensile strength, that she has developed in here, and this is what she does. Well, it's the feeling of the music. They interview her, and they say, it's the feeling of the music passing through. So I have to, as long as there's music, I have to play it. As long as there's music, I have to play it. That's a beautiful feeling to have, and it keeps you young and it keeps you strong. It's always the feeling. So are you where you want to be today? You know. And if you're still waiting, you know that you're waiting. What I encourage you to do is imagine what it is you're waiting for in the greatest possible clarity that you can sum it up. How would it be if you could have it be any way at all? How would it be for you if you could have it be any way at all? How would it be for another person who is suffering in your field of vision, if in your imagination they could have it be any way at all. You don't know, and everyone is in charge of their own reality and entitled to create it the way they would have it be, but at the level of feeling, how would you imagine this person to be thrilled with their life? Can you picture that? Can you picture that and send that along? And there's a word for that called blessing. That's a blessing. You hear blessing thrown around, a lot. Here's what a blessing isn't. A blessing isn't a subtle come on to your religion. A blessing isn't conditional. A blessing isn't, well, if only you'd read the right book or follow the right Lord, you'd have it. No, a blessing is, I'm going to picture you happy. I'm going to picture you well. Somebody was telling me some time back, they were doing this. This is years ago, but I guess they're still doing it. They were sitting at a stoplight. We're doing some traffic imagery today, evidently. But sitting at a stoplight, the left turn, the people turning this way in front of them, turning left off of the perpendicular street. You see the faces of the drivers passing by, all, hunkered down, looking where the curb is and all. And this person telling me this, each one, I saw them smile. I saw them glow. I saw them thrive. I saw them thrive as they did drive. I saw each one. This is not manipulative. It's not coercive. It's not saying, well, they have to do this or practice that or stand on their heads or something else. It's just sending them happiness, which they're then free to accept or reject or wonder about. And I think sometimes that when suddenly you're just bopping along in life and a great feeling of well-being comes over you out of nowhere. Nothing is different in the world of form, but suddenly you just feel better about yourself. I think you've stepped into a blessing. Something is left hanging there in the air. We've been talking for a year now about droplets and crud hanging in the air that we step into. How about we step into a blessing? We step into the midst of this. And it isn't just from our fellow humans, as beautiful as that might be. And it isn't even just from nature, the blessing of nature. It's from our source. It's from our source that has created us and placed in plain sight all around us so many manifestations of good that we can pick up, that we can embody. And we forget this. We forget this. There's an awful lot to be said for gratitude. There's an awful lot to be said for letting go of the past. And there's an awful lot to be said for keeping on, keeping on. During the past month in the basic series on the Science of Mind, you heard a repeated theme from me, from Lisa here, that spiritual practice requires commitment, dedication, regular doing, daily habit building of this. And so on Friday of this week, the Asian New Year, Lunar New Year, will begin the Year of the Ox. And I don't know exactly what that means. I've been reading up on it. And whoever you read has it mean something different. And so I think with all symbols like that, it's up to the interpretive mind of each of us to decide what it means. So here's what it means for me, and you see if this works for you. I think very simply about oxes. I have very simple, uncluttered thought about oxen. I've never even, I don't think, seen one, maybe in the flesh, maybe I have. I'm not a farm kid, I'm a city kid, so everything I know about them comes from TV and movies and stuff. But I see them as single-minded, focused, and unstoppable. You get behind the oxen with the plow and you tell them go yonder, and they go yonder. and nothing gets in the way. And if it rains, it snows, the earth opens up beneath, they just keep going on along. A little oxen energy is good. Am I suggesting that we entirely embrace the consciousness of the oxen and leave it at that? No. There are so many different images around, but right now, today, this might be really useful for us to just keep moving toward San Antonio, to just keep going, eating up the miles. I just got new tires on my car, and they call them tiger paws, and I got a long conversation from the guy at the place about Uniroyal tiger paws. Am I allowed to? I'm not endorsing. I just got them, so I don't know, But and I remember the old Uniroyal tiger paw commercials where they had actual tiger paws on four wheels of the car, eating up, like with claws out, doing this, like eating up the miles. And I thought, that's a cool image, So I give it to you. We'll mix it with the oxen, the tiger paws. Picture oxen with tiger paws, all right? Oxen with oxen feet. They're eating up the miles, that's the point. These things are just plowing ahead. They're not speeding up, they're not slowing down, they're not turning left, they're not turning right. They have a destination and they have a purpose, and they will literally, by God, get there. Well, that's who we are. So let's take the energy of this year and say, every day in every way I'm progressing. Every day in every way I'm getting better and better. That's an old saying in self-help circles. Every day, every moment, I am learning more about myself. I am progressing toward my goals. I'm progressing toward peace and trust and happiness in my life, justice in my culture, and that brings me to this. In the teaching of Science of Mind as it's done today in our Heartfelt Living class and other basic classes, there are charts and stuff that talk about the universal and the personal or individual. And say, well, here's what's true at the level of the universal. That there's one life, that life is God, that life is all the life there is, and so forth. And then at the personal level, well, you are that life. You are the expression of that life. And what's true of the universal in macrocosm is true of you in microcosm, to the use you make of it. And all of that's very good. And it leaves something out. That between the universal and the individual is the communal, is the social, is the global, okay? The collective of us. Because every faith system on earth says you can't do this alone. This is nothing is really a solitary practice, even amongst those who are the hermits and the anchorites, who go off by themselves. That's a tiny little group of people. And even so, I don't know the psychology that goes into that, but what I do know is for us today in this world, we're with the people. We're with the world. We're with... I was sharing this in a class the other night, how people, groups of people, tribes of people, ethnicities of people who live in relative isolation from other groups, the name they have for the group they're in is the people. Is the people. And it's only by encountering other groups that they add on to that. They refine that somewhat. And I used the example of the Maya in saying this. And then I was reading this week, and you're going to hear more about this later in the year, about the Orcoqueza band. The Orcoqueza band of First Nations people. The Orcoqueza basically occupied this land where we are here at Creative Life. I can't promise they were like on this acreage, but in this vicinity, between the various rivers and down to the coast. You know what Orcoqueza means in their language? The people. We're the people, That sense of shared destiny And I brought this up in another class a couple of weeks ago about how this whole New Thought teaching, its forerunners in Western culture were all about communal good and less about whether you got rich, you know, or you succeeded or you moved into leadership. And some of that had to do with the way society was structured, that you couldn't really change the position that greatly into which you were born and you know, move into the monarchy or something. But most of it had to do with the idea that, well, they used a metaphor, it's like a temple. The people are like a temple, and each member of the people is a pillar in the temple. And so your work, your inner work, your spiritual work, your trustworthiness, you know, your dignity, your honor, this kind of thing that you could work on yourself, your fearlessness, that made you a strong and reliable pillar in the temple. And it was only until much, much later that it became about individual good. And so when you read Ernest Holmes and you read a lot of the later works of Science of Mind, it's all about you. In fact, we're talking about a class soon called This Thing Called You. And Holmes writes that book in that voice, in the second person singular. You can do this, and you can thrive. And the individual reading that thinks, hey, that's great, you know. But let's not bypass the fact that you're able to be you, because he's able to be him, and she's able to be her, and they're able to be them. And so, taken all together, we have a responsibility. Not to save, not to rescue, not to infantilize one another and assume that people are too, simple-minded or something, and to make up their own minds, to choose their own destiny, to create their own good. No, not at all. We're not going to interfere. We're not going to step on other people's rights by the spiritual work that we do. We're going to know that the one life that made us is the one life that is thriving through them right now, and the best thing possible that could possibly happen, you know, the best thing that could really occur is that they know that, because when they know that, they never give up. And they're like the oxen, and they move straight ahead, because that's who we were. Because there was a time when, wasn't there, when all of us were caught up in all sorts of theological questions and complexities in this, and what we yearned for was just a direct, simple faith and a knowing that there was a power that had us, you know, that would catch us when we fell, and that would love on us unconditionally, even if we did the same thing over and over. It wasn't just a one-shot deal. It was finding expression in the world through us just as we were, even when we were mistake-prone. And never once did it hold any of this against us. Never once did it go like people do and bring up grudges and bring up stuff from the old days. No, never once. It just sees us and saw us then as whole and complete. And this is what we want for people, is for people to wake up, as Ms. Brooks has in her poem here. And this is what we're waiting for. And this is what we're preparing for. And are we ready for this? And if Son comes, how shall we greet him? Shall we not dread him? Shall we not fear him? Son, S-U-N, okay? Son, truth, the Son of truth, the light of truth. When truth comes, shall we not fear it? Shall we not dread? Why would we? Because we've gotten so good at living without it. At all the compensating mechanisms, all the stuff that we do, the many inventions that Scripture speaks of that we've sought out. That's why it scares us. It scares us. And we wonder, am I good enough for this? And we want to pull back into, what is it, the sleep and the coolness of snug unawareness. We want to pull the covers back over our head and say, let somebody else handle this. Can't somebody else handle this? You know, I'll tell you something, quite honestly. Maybe one of the toughest things about ministry is that we who teach this and are sort of the public face of the teaching are the ones who have to explain when things go wrong in the world. have to spin it, have to make it okay, have to make it. And in order to be able to do that, okay, I'm going to say something here I hadn't planned to, but there we go. So Lisa is filming, and Danielle's reading the comments, and they're the behind-the-scenes people, and they're getting pictures taken of themselves for a behind-the-scenes deal today. A lot goes on here to these services that is not on camera. The musicians rehearse and so on. But you have no idea the amount of work that goes on during the week amongst the spiritual leaders of this center, the practitioners and the ministers, to keep ourselves grounded, to keep ourselves believing in the stuff we tell you, because we don't want to be phonies. And Lisa goes on there and does her live stream reading, and David goes on there and does his live stream reading, and I get up here, and other speakers get up here on Sundays and do these presentations, and we've got classes going, as you hear, and other groups and things that we're all involved in, and everybody's trying to be upbeat, and everybody's trying to tell everybody else it's going to be okay. And sometimes we don't feel okay, so we've got to go to the place. We've got to go to the place that we know to, and sometimes we go there, we trip there lightly, and we go there happily, and like this, and sometimes we go there like oxen. I got to get fed. I got to get what I need so that I can bring it to who? The people. So I can bring it to the people. We the people. Bring it here. Bring it here. There's a lot yet to be accomplished. We are not where we want to be. We're not where we were. Progress has been made in the world, and not enough of it. And so we work every day in consciousness and with hands, and an example that gets brought up every 3 months, especially this food event that Danielle spoke to you about coming up on the 27th. Is a way to not only put food into hungry people's cars and onto their tables, but it's a way to affirm with each passing family, hunger is becoming history. Human hunger is becoming history. It's becoming a thing of the past. It's going to be, as Holmes said, rolled up like a scroll and numbered with the things that were once thought to be. That's what we're affirming with every last thing. The Blood Center now has a feature on their phone app. See, I do know a little about phone apps. They have a feature on their phone app that when you give blood, they'll tell you when someone's received it. They won't tell you who, of course, that would be wrong, but they'll tell you tonight there was a surgery and your blood or your plasma got used. How powerful is that, okay? And so with each transmission of that energy, we affirm and know that one day injury, why not? One day disease, why not? Will be a thing of the past. One day the coronavirus. They say, well, they're not so sure it's going to mutate. And I think when we get our heads straight, it will. Smallpox did, why not? So my point in all of this is, I guess this. Consider yourself, first of all, as a planetary citizen. Planetary citizen. You're not just you. You're not just alone. You are a pillar in the temple. You are a star in the heavens. And yet, the only person you have to convince of this repeatedly is yourself. And so there's work to be done. Let's do our spiritual work. Let's do our meditation. Let's do our prayer. Let's do our reading. Let's keep our conversation in heaven. Let's tune into the live streams and the services. We are not the only center for spiritual living on the face of the earth. I'm very happy to tell you there are many other groups like ours, Unity as well, and other groups, too many to name. They all have some kind of online presence. If one website's got nothing going on right now, when you need it, go to another one, and then another one, and all over YouTube and all over. And the only litmus test I would use in navigating all of this stuff is it fear-based? Is it fear-based? Or is it strong on principle of oneness? If it's fear-based, give it a pass. You got enough of that. You got enough of that. And move to the place where they're telling you there's one life, there's one power, and here's another aspect of it, and here's another aspect of it. And some of it gets real creative, and some of it, like me, gets kind of off tangential. But it's all good. It's all good. That's part of your spiritual work. This was not available to us decades ago. Now it is. Used to, you had to go buy a book and read the book, and if you didn't like the book, you had to go find another book. Now, in the course of an hour, you can swirl through all of this amazing information. Also, old-time stuff is on there. Neville and Alan Watts and some recordings of people from some decades ago. Anyway, take all of this stuff in, chew it up the way the oxen eat, and keep moving forward. And keep, now, if it's San Antonio you're going to, so I use this as an example, then you must know something about what's there. Maybe you've been there before, or you've visited it online, or you've seen pictures, what have you. You've got a vision. That's your gift. Your vision of that destination is different than anybody else's vision. It's similar, but it's unique. It's got some aspect to it that you bring. And that's the gift that you'll deposit when you arrive there, you see. That maybe that place won't be what you expected until you're there and you make it complete. This is how powerful we are. This is how necessary we are. I've got one last thing to read to you out of the Science Mind textbook. Figured I'd do this for a while. Maybe all year, but I don't want to commit. The last 4 weeks, 4 of the last 5 weeks, and well, Lisa's too, were based on the first 4 introductory chapters in the Science Mind textbook. We didn't really tell you that at the time. This goes into the next one called In the Beginning, God. In the beginning of any creative series, there is absolute intelligence alone, pure spirit, all-inclusive, everywhere infinite. This all-spirit could not have the impulse to move unless it were conscious. Therefore, spirit is the power that knows itself. The account of creation, which says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, does not refer to a time when there was no creation, but rather to the process of eternal creation, which is a continual manifestation of spirit. And eternal creation is proved by the fact that we must suppose spirit to be conscious intelligence, and there can be no conscious intelligence unless it is conscious of something. Think San Antonio here. Spirit is conscious and must be conscious of something. Therefore, it must always create. What a glorious concept is such an idea of an eternal creative principle. There is no stagnation in spirit, nor should there be any in our idea of spirituality. To be spiritual is to create. The spirit is alive, conscious, aware, and active, and we're always creating something. Shall we not shudder, shall we not flee into the shelter, the dear thick shelter of the familiar propitious haze? Sweet is it to sleep in the coolness of snug unawareness. The dark hangs heavily over the eyes until today, when we arise and thrive. So let's know together now there is one life, one power. This is not so because we declare it to be so. This is so because it is declaring itself as such through me and through you, this one life. We know it, we feel it, we've yearned for it, for communion with it, connection with its powers, and the unfoldment of our own destiny through it. Now I affirm and know for each of us there is a clear picture of spirit and the promised land toward which we head, sometimes across what seem like miles and miles of wilderness. Days, weeks of not much happening. This winter season that we're in especially in parts of the country where winter weather is profoundly affecting. There's a sense of not much happening, even of death, dormancy, an ending to things, and yet beneath the surface of the earth, something is preparing. Something waits, preparing. So we are preparing for heaven on earth. And it starts with the impulses of each one of us. Am I willing to let bygones be bygones? Something as simple as that we learned in the sandbox, that we learn on the playground. Am I willing to give other people a break? Am I willing to let my natural kindness and compassion show forth? To that degree, I get to experience what's been called the kingdom of heaven, not after I die, but right here today. To the degree that I see angels, to the degree that I offer blessing in the form of the expectancy of good for all, to that degree I am an agent of healing, a bringer of light. And all of this sounds so lofty, so grand, and yet it's what we came here to do. It is in our nature. And all this teaching suggests is that we sweep aside all that would hinder that nature and hold us back from all that we can be. And so, like the oxen, as our friends of the Pacific Rim celebrate the start of a new year, a new form of consciousness, the year of the ox, so like the oxen, with dogged determination we move forward, doing our spiritual work, rooting out and replacing every resentment, every regret, every limit we have imposed on ourselves. I claim that this is easy to do because it's natural to us, and for this knowing and its manifestation in form, I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
Okay. So I do the daily reading from the 365 Science of Mind, which is a collection of readings by Ernest Holmes. And a lot of the months have a Bible quote. And today's Bible quote was from the Thessalonians, which was pray without ceasing. I have many thoughts on pray without ceasing. I'm only going to give you the one that directly relates to what Jesse said today, which is blessing. Because when you hear when you hear that quote, pray without ceasing, it's like you think of those hermits locked up in their caves praying all the time. Well, I'm going to break this small fact to you. You are praying all the time. My question to you is, are you praying positively? Are you praying not so positively? Or as one of our members who's a therapist, she's way more than that, but I'm going to use that word because I can't remember her actual title. Are you praying in a preferred emotion or a non-preferred emotion? So when I think of the idea of pray without ceasing, it goes hand in hand with what Jesse said about blessing. When I think of you, whoever you are, whether I know your name or not, I am going to think of you healthy and happy and whole. Every time I think about you, that is the way I want to think about you, because that is praying without ceasing, and that is blessing. I'm not asking you to do anything other than be you, whole, healthy, and happy in those qualities of God. So in that knowing, I'm going to pray a little more intensely. And know that there is one life, one power, one presence, one love. And that love flows through me, in me, as me. I am a walking expression of that love, a walking expression of that presence. And as I know this about myself, so too do I know it about each and every one of you, that you are a walking expression of the love of Spirit, the love of God. And in that knowing, just in that knowing, amazing things happen, both personally and collectively. As we are free to be ourselves, we give that freedom to be yourself to everyone that we meet. And that is what I'm knowing, the freedom to be yourself, authentically an expression of the love of Spirit. And I know this with everything that I am. And I know it with gratitude. And I relax and I release and I know that it is so. And so it is.
Say it with me now, something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my
I
body.
feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am.
I feel it in everything I am.
I choose it.
I choose
I
it.
trust it.
I trust it.
I use it.
I use it.
And I love it.
And I love it.
So it is.
And so it is.